My name is McKinnon, and I was 35 years old. On the morning of my wedding, I got one text from my mom. Don't ruin their vacation with your guilt trip. No greeting, no explanation, no apology, just that. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, reread it twice, trying to convince myself I was misinterpreting the tone, that maybe she meant something softer than what it felt like. I knew better. Without thinking, I opened social media. My brother had posted a story, a boomerang. My entire family laughing by a pool, champagne glasses raised, sunlight bouncing off water so blue it looked unreal. The caption read, "We finally feel whole." They were in Napa, at the Alberts, the same place I had recommended to my mom last year when she said she needed a break from the noise. She'd laughed back then and said it was too extravagant. Apparently, it wasn't too extravagant for the weekend of my wedding. They had all gone, my parents, my brother, his wife, even Uncle Greg, who avoided family events like obligations, was there, sunglasses on, cigar in hand, smiling like he owned something. That brunch wasn't an accident. It was a decision, a coordinated one. And in that moment, sitting on the edge of the hotel bed in my dress, it hit me that this was their celebration. Not me, not my marriage, not my future. Them. I didn't reply. I didn't text. I didn't call. I turned my phone off and left it on the nightstand. The ceremony went on as planned. Fewer guests than we expected, but the ones who mattered were there. My husband's parents hugged me like I was their own. Friends showed up loud and dressed beautifully, filling in the gaps my family left behind. I said my vows. He said his. We kissed. People clapped. Cameras flashed under string lights. From the outside, it looked perfect. Inside, something was changing. Not anger exactly, not grief. Something quieter, colder. I'd been hurt by them before. When they skipped my graduation after I moved across the country and finished college alone. When they used my name to get a business credit line without asking. When they laughed behind my back at Christmas 2 years ago, calling me a tech fluke with too many emotions. I brushed all of that off. I told myself they didn't mean it the way it sounded. That they were old school, stuck in their ways, bad at showing love. I made excuses because hoping was easier than accepting the truth. I had even reserved 3 extra seats in the front row for them, place cards printed, name tags tied with silver ribbon. The week before the wedding, my husband asked if I was sure about including them. I told him yes. I told him maybe this would be the moment they showed up for me. Really showed up. I didn't want to deny them the chance. I should have known better. That night, while the rest of the guests moved upstairs to the bar, I stayed behind. Our suite had a small desk by the window. I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at the city lights for a moment before logging in. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt clear. Step 1 was simple. Cancel the cards. There were 6 active under my corporate umbrella, 2 under my dad's name, used for business meals that always seemed to involve golf courses and cigars. 1 under my brother's name, supposedly for client travel, even though he never had clients. 1 under my mom's name for charity work. The last 2 were aliases, ghost cards they used to siphon money through vendors that didn't exist. I froze them all in minutes. Step 2 was the foundation. I started it after my second software company went public. I poured part of the proceeds into it for education grants and community initiatives. I brought my family in so they could be proud of something, so they could help build a legacy. They turned it into a trophy shelf, lavish board dinners, international site visits that were really luxury vacations. I froze every account and notified the board. Full audit pending, no more access. Step 3 was the trust, established before I turned 30. Designed to secure not only my future, but theirs. Generational wealth, stability. I'd already been considering dissolving it after years of watching them drain it without gratitude or purpose. That night, I initiated the process. I knew the language. I knew the loopholes. It would take weeks, but it would end. By midnight, my family had no idea the lifestyle they curated so carefully. Through my name was collapsing in real time. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and lay down next to my husband, who was already asleep, peaceful in a way I envied. The next morning, the messages had already started piling up. I turned my phone back on around 10 the next morning. My husband was still asleep, curled toward the window, sunlight cutting across his shoulder. For a moment, I watched him breathe and wondered how someone could look so calm while everything else was breaking. Then the screen lit up and the calm shattered. 37 missed calls, 17 voicemails, dozens of texts stacked so tight they blurred together. Most were from my dad and my brother. Some were from numbers I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who they were. My mom's church friends, Greg's drinking buddies, people who suddenly felt entitled to an opinion because money was involved. The voicemails told a story all on their own. My dad's voice came first, clipped and controlled, the tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable. "McKinnon, call me. We need to talk. You've made a mistake." Then my brother, sharp and offended. "What the hell did you do to the cards? I was in the middle of booking something for Mom. You seriously trying to screw us over the day after your wedding?" Then my mom, exactly the same energy as the text she sent before the ceremony. "I told you not to make this about you." That was it. No congratulations, no apology, just blame. I didn't answer. I got dressed, went downstairs, and took my husband out for brunch in the city. We sat at a small table near the window, ordered too much food, and talked about nothing important. I let the noise sit where it belonged, outside the moment. By the time we got back to the hotel, 3 emails from the foundation board were waiting. The head of compliance, 2 junior lawyers. They had all received notifications that certain funds were frozen pending audit. I'd worded the notice carefully, cited financial irregularities, attached screenshots, years of small transactions that added up to something ugly. It wasn't personal anymore. It was official. That afternoon, my brother called again. I let it go to voicemail. His message came in hot and defensive. "Okay, so what now? You're going to take everything just because we didn't show up to your wedding. That's how petty you are. You know how much we do for you behind the scenes. Do you have any idea how bad this makes you look?" I laughed out loud, a short sound that surprised me. My husband looked up from his book. I handed him the phone. He listened, handed it back, and said quietly, "You're doing the right thing." And I knew he was right, because this wasn't about a missed wedding. This was decades of buildup finally breaking the dam. Their absence just clarified what I already knew. They never cared unless there was something in it for them. The next day, the real storm hit. A lawyer contacted me, a name I recognized immediately. My dad had used him once during a shady property deal years ago. He claimed to represent several concerned parties and said my actions surrounding the trust and corporate entities had caused distress and potential financial harm. He used phrases like reconsider restitution and legal action like they were magic words meant to scare me back into line. I sent a single reply. 2 lines. All funds in question are tied to my personal income and held under my legal ownership. There is no further discussion to be had. I signed it, attached the records that proved it, and copied my legal team. 3 hours later, the lawyer replied with 1 word, "Understood." That night, my husband and I celebrated quietly. Pizza on the balcony, city lights below, no guests, no speeches. He looked at me and said I'd never looked lighter. I felt it too, but I also knew my family wouldn't walk away. They weren't built that way. They tried to twist it, spin it, guilt me from every direction. What they didn't realize yet was that their access to me, emotional, financial, relational, was permanently gone. They weren't going to sue their way back into my life, but they were going to try. By Wednesday, it got uglier. My mom somehow reached one of the junior lawyers at the foundation. She left him a voicemail accusing me of abuse of power, claiming she was a co-founder and that I was sabotaging years of her community work. The lawyer forwarded it to me and asked how to proceed. I told him to document everything and ignore direct contact. If she wanted to talk, she could go through my legal team. That night, my brother tried calling again. I let it ring. A minute later, a message came through. "You're really going to drag the whole family down over this. Over 1 weekend. This is why nobody takes you seriously. You don't get what it means to forgive. Grow the hell up." They still didn't get it. They thought this was emotional, temporary, something I'd cool off from and hand back. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. Thursday morning, my dad showed up at our apartment. I opened the door just enough for him to see my face. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the wedding. He went straight into it, loud and furious. He said I'd humiliated them. that a board meeting had been canceled because of my trust nonsense, that Greg couldn't even use his card anymore. He asked what I thought I was doing. I didn't say anything. He kept going, telling me they supported me even when I was impossible, that I was pulling the rug out from under my own blood, that my husband wouldn't be enough when this blew up. That was it. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and told him it was over. Every connection we had, professional, financial, familial, was closed. He said something about court, about how I'd regret cutting off the people who made me. I didn't answer. I walked back inside and locked the door. By the end of the week, they were already looking for another angle. They always did. They just hadn't realized yet that there were no doors left to knock on. By Friday, the story they were telling themselves started leaking into the public. My sister, who hadn't said a word since before the wedding, posted a long thread online about how her sibling had cut off the family for no reason, how money had changed me, how our parents were heartbroken but too proud to admit it. She included photos from the Napa brunch, framing it like a healing trip, like they'd gone there to reconnect, and somehow I'd chosen distance instead. It was neat, polished, almost believable if you didn't know the pattern. The replies were immediate and brutal. Strangers offering sympathy, others asking uncomfortable questions, a few people tagging me directly, demanding explanations I didn't owe. My friends started texting, some confused, some angry on my behalf, some just checking in to see if I was okay. I didn't respond publicly. I forwarded the post to my lawyer and asked him to finalize the second audit on the foundation, the one that would detail every luxury purchase disguised as charity work. Let them talk. They were playing for sympathy. I was playing for the truth. Saturday morning started quietly, which should have been my first warning. Then an email landed from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year, Jenna. She'd worked at the foundation and left without drama, one short resignation email, citing personal concerns and nothing else. At the time, everyone assumed she'd burned out. Her message now was barely 2 lines. I saw what your sister posted. I'm sorry. I've been sitting on something for a while. If you're ready, I'll send it. I replied that I was ready. 10 minutes later, a shared drive appeared in my inbox. Over 100 files, PDFs, screenshots, spreadsheets, audio notes, full transcripts of email threads. At first, it was overwhelming, just data stacked on data, until the pattern emerged. Jenna had documented everything. She'd raised concerns early, asked why tens of thousands were charged to strategic donor engagement that turned out to be luxury wine tours. She'd questioned invoices for conferences that never happened, hotel bills for board retreats that were really family vacations. When she pushed for clarity, meetings disappeared from her calendar. Emails went unanswered. She was iced out quietly, professionally, until leaving was the only option. The worst part wasn't the spending, it was the signatures. My name stamped on approvals I never gave. Digital authorizations fabricated to make it look like I'd signed off. They weren't just draining the foundation, they were putting liability on me. I forwarded everything to my legal team and the board's compliance officer. My lawyer called within minutes. His voice was different, sharper. This isn't mismanagement, he said. This is fraud. I didn't tell my family what I had. I didn't warn them. I let the system work the way it was supposed to. 3 days later, the foundation board froze the remaining accounts and released a short public statement. Pending internal investigation, all executive operations are suspended. Auditing has begun. They didn't name names. They didn't have to. That night, my mom texted me. You went too far. Not we need to talk. Not I'm sorry. Just that. I ignored it. The next morning, something I didn't expect happened. A journalist emailed me. He worked for a financial accountability blog I'd never heard of, but he clearly knew his way around nonprofit filings. He referenced irregularities in past reports and said a source had pointed him toward me. I didn't give him a statement. I told him where to look and what to request through public channels. Everything was there. They'd just assumed no one would care enough to dig. Late Tuesday afternoon, another email arrived. This one made my stomach drop. It was from the IRS. Simple, direct. A federal audit had been initiated concerning nonprofit tax reporting. Irregularities based on documentation provided by a whistleblower. I hadn't reported them. I didn't need to. Someone else had. Maybe Jenna, maybe a donor, maybe the journalist. It didn't matter. They were caught in a system they couldn't guilt, threaten, or manipulate. By Friday, the silence from my family wasn't peace. It was calculation. I knew that look. They were regrouping, trying to figure out who they could still pressure, who might still be loyal. But the board had cut them off completely. Email access revoked. Donor portals locked. My dad even tried calling one of my senior advisors, a man named Michael who'd known me since I was 23. Michael sent me the transcript afterward. My dad said it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd become unstable since marrying my husband and needed to be reined in. Michael told him flat out that I owned everything and he owned nothing. That weekend, the first story went live. Small blog, but thorough. It laid out luxury spending disguised as charity operations, complete with dates, destinations, and amounts. Photos followed. My uncle on a yacht labeled as a site visit. My mom holding a foundation clipboard at a private resort. My brother at a poker table booked as team building. The mask started slipping fast. 2 donors pulled their commitments within 48 hours. One was a hedge fund guy. The other was a school district we'd partnered with for STEM programs. Both released statements saying they'd been misled. I hadn't spoken to any of them in over a week when my brother finally broke the silence. He showed up outside our apartment late at night, ringing the doorbell over and over. I didn't let him in. He called from the sidewalk. I answered. He said I'd destroyed everything and asked if that's what I wanted. I said nothing. Then he said the part that stuck. You were supposed to take care of us. That was when I knew there was nothing left to fix. That Monday, my mom finally cracked. She emailed me with no subject line, just a short paragraph that felt rehearsed and sharp at the same time. You've made your choice. I hope your husband is worth what you've lost. I read it twice and deleted it because I hadn't lost anything. I had just stopped carrying what was never mine to begin with. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit arrived exactly the way I expected it would. Civil, predictable, alleging breach of fiduciary duty, reputational damage, emotional harm, and intentional financial sabotage. Their lawyer was polished, based out of San Diego, and the complaint read like a bedtime story for people who believe accountability is optional. The foundation was mentioned over 50 times. So was my name. My legal team didn't blink. They prepared the countersuit in less than a week. Ours came with exhibits, time-stamped invoices, recorded conversations, audit logs, Jenna's archive, copies of forged authorizations. It didn't just refute their claims, it buried them. But the real blow didn't come from the court, it came from the banks. 2 major financial institutions closed accounts tied to the foundation after internal reviews flagged ongoing litigation and regulatory risk. That meant frozen funds, credit lines shut down, access blocked. They couldn't even pay their lawyer without jumping through layers of approval they no longer controlled. My brother texted me a screenshot of his banking app, showing a 0 balance, and wrote, "Hope you're proud of this." I didn't respond. A week later, the IRS made a quiet move. Not public, not dramatic, just real. A freeze on all charitable disbursements pending completion of the audit. That was the final nail. Without money flowing, the structure collapsed under its own weight. And that's when the begging started. First, it was my sister. She sent a long email pretending she hadn't posted anything online, pretending she'd been on my side the whole time. She said she didn't realize what our parents had done. She said she missed me. She used the word family 14 times. I didn't reply. Then came my mom, not by email. She showed up at my office unannounced. She looked older, smaller, worn down by a system she used to believe she was above. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. She just asked to talk. I stood with her in the lobby and told her calmly that I had nothing left to say. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't trust her, and I never would again. The lawsuit never made it to trial. They dropped it quietly a month later. They couldn't afford to fight it, and they couldn't risk discovery. After that, they faded. My dad rented a smaller place an hour outside the city. My uncle moved in with a friend. My brother bounced between freelance gigs. My mom still tried to get invited to charity events. No one took her calls. Through all of it, my husband never wavered. When it got ugly, he stood beside me. When it got quiet, he reminded me that letting go wasn't loss. It was clarity. I believed him. 6 months passed. The foundation was officially dissolved. The door stayed closed. And then something better happened. I became a mother. Our son was born 2 weeks early, healthy, loud, and already looking like he knew more than we did. Holding him rewired something in me. The bitterness didn't vanish, but it softened. Being responsible for someone who had never known manipulation made me less tolerant of it everywhere else. We named him Jacob, not after anyone. Just a clean name, untangled from history. A week ago, we threw him a small birthday party. Backyard cake, balloons, a few noisy toys he won't remember, but we never will. My husband's parents were there. The friends who actually showed up to our wedding were there. I sent an invitation to my parents. No message, just the date, time, and address. They didn't respond. No call, no text. No gift slipped in quietly with no return address. Nothing. At first, I felt that old flicker, the part of me that still wants to believe they might change. Then it passed. I looked down at my son chewing on a plastic dinosaur and understood something clearly. This was the clean break I needed. They never wanted me. They wanted access, control, image. And now there was no money involved, no leverage, no guilt to weaponize. Just an invitation to a child's birthday. And even that wasn't enough. I'm not angry anymore. I'm clear. My family isn't missing. They were never there to begin with, but I have a new one now. And this time, it's real. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful at first. It was heavy, like the kind of quiet that presses against your ears after a loud room empties out. I kept expecting something else to drop, another email, another demand, another attempt to reframe the story in a way that made them the injured party and me the villain. It never came. Instead, the days moved forward, ordinary and steady, and I realized how much of my life had been lived in anticipation of their next need, their next disappointment, their next judgment. Without that constant pull, everything slowed down in a way that felt unfamiliar but right. The lawsuit evaporated quietly. No dramatic withdrawal, no announcement, just a notification from my legal team that it had been dismissed without prejudice. Translation: they didn't have the money or the nerve to push it any further. Discovery would have destroyed them, and they knew it. The foundation followed soon after, formally dissolved, its final paperwork filed with language so clean and final it felt like closing a door that had been stuck open for years. There was no ceremony, no goodbye, just an ending. I didn't reach out. I didn't check on them. I didn't ask mutual contacts how they were doing. That surprised me, how little curiosity I felt. It wasn't cruelty, it was acceptance. I finally understood that knowing more wouldn't give me peace. Distance already had. Life filled the space quickly. Work stabilized without the constant drain of managing other people's messes. Evenings stretched longer. Conversations with my husband grew lighter, not because we avoided hard topics, but because we weren't carrying ghosts into the room anymore. He would catch me sometimes, staring out the window, and ask what I was thinking about. Most days, the answer was nothing important, and that felt like a victory. When our son arrived 2 weeks early and screaming like he had something urgent to say to the world, it rewired me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Holding him stripped away the last layer of doubt I didn't know I was still carrying. There was no room for manipulation around someone so new, so unmarked. I didn't want him growing up watching me justify being treated like an afterthought. I wanted him to see boundaries as normal, love as consistent, and presence as something you earn by showing up. We kept his life simple, no grand announcements, no performative family moments staged for approval, just people who were actually there. When we planned his first birthday, it was small by design. Backyard cake, a few balloons tied to chairs, friends who had stood beside us when it mattered. My husband's parents laughing too loud, offering help without conditions. I did send the invitation to my parents, not as a test, not as a trap, just a fact. Date, time, address. They didn't respond, not even a polite excuse. No gift arrived quietly later. No message filtered through someone else. Nothing. I felt the flicker, that old reflex of hope, rise and fade in the same breath. Watching my son gnaw on a plastic dinosaur, I understood that this was the answer I'd been waiting for all along. When there was nothing to take from me, nothing to leverage, nothing to display, they had no interest. That clarity hurt less than the confusion ever did. I don't tell this story because I won. I tell it because I stopped losing myself. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped financing the lie that we were one. What I have now is quieter, smaller, and infinitely more real. They thought I'd regret choosing distance. What I regret is not choosing it sooner.